Welcome to Alimentary, the podcast series where you will learn about your amazing body, how it works, and of course why food is so important, and also pick up some simple recipe and lifestyle tips and tweaks to help you to influence your health in a positive way. Welcome back to another episode of Alimentary. I'm your host, Lynn, and today we're unpacking the sometimes confusing facts around phytates and oxalates. So the reason why I wanted to produce an episode about these compounds is because you might hear about them referred to negatively, or the food that contain them referred to negatively as anti-nutrients, because they can reduce our absorption of minerals and thus promote mineral deficiencies. However, there are very healthy plant foods which contain these compounds. And so rather than stressing over whether you should eat them or not, it is worth understanding what they are and when and if you need to be wary of them, rather than fearfully avoiding them altogether. So much information is coming at us about what is healthy and not healthy. So I just wanted to remove any potential confusion or fear around them. And you'll see as we go on that, as with everything, you don't have to think about them too much if you focus on a healthy gut and a varied diet. So let's start with phytates. They are naturally occurring compounds found in plant foods like grains, legumes, nuts and seeds. So straight away there's, a healthy group of food. Phytate is phytic acid bound to a mineral, and it's a type of inositol. And inositols are types of sugar which our bodies produce to provide structure to our cells. So basically a beneficial type of natural sugar. I suppose as an aside, just to differentiate them from processed sugar, inositols, which include phytates, may have health benefits, including the development of our cell membranes, so which we mentioned there, the cell structure, and they may lower the risk of metabolic syndrome, relieve symptoms of PCOS, reduce the risk of gestational diabetes, lower cholesterol. They may help us to process insulin properly, and potentially can relieve the symptoms of depression and mood disorders, obviously as part of an overall, health protocol. So this sugar is beneficial and not to be confused with processed sugar. Now, in plants, phytates are the main storage form of phosphorus, and they can bind minerals like iron, zinc, magnesium or calcium. And in that way, they sort of keep a hold of them and reduce their availability for our digestive system. However, these plants also contain an enzyme called phytase, which neutralizes phytic acid and frees up the minerals so that we can absorb them. Now, according to some studies, humans don't produce enough phytase to safely consume large quantities of high phytate foods on a regular basis. However, our gut bacteria, our endogenous microflora, particularly the lactobacilli and some other species as well, they can produce phytase. So just going back to the fact that our, a healthy gut bacteria, healthy gut microbiome is super important, so that we can make some of this phytase, and that helps us to neutralize the phytic acid. Now, there are other things that we can do when we're preparing and cooking phytate-rich foods in order to release the phytates and make the minerals more bioavailable, or we're more able to absorb them and use them. And we'll come on to that shortly. So just before we talk about, what we can do, I did want to just dig a little deeper into the benefits of phytates. So according to research, phytates may have health benefits which include acting as antioxidants, regulating blood sugar levels, and they may even have anti-cancer properties. Some experts suggest that it's the phytic acid in foods like whole grains and beans which give them their protective properties against heart disease, cancer and diabetes. So we definitely want to include them in a varied diet. And, once we're not mineral deficient, we want to reduce maybe the phytates so that we get more of the minerals, but we don't need to avoid them altogether. Refined grains have little or no phytic acid, by the way. So that's the ultra processed food. Phytates excreted in our urine may improve our kidney health and prevent kidney stones. Phytic acid plays a role in pancreatic function and insulin secretion, and may reduce the glycemic response from meals, so that avoids blood sugar spikes and also helps us to feel fuller for longer. So the iron binding properties in phytic acid can protect against or reduce iron overload. So this would be useful to note for people who have hemochromatosis, for example. So on balance, once our digestion is working well and we eat a varied diet and we're not in the position of having mineral deficiencies, the health benefits of plants are fantastic and, wide-reaching. So how can we include them and overcome or reduce the anti-nutrient effects of the binding phytic acid in our food? So let's start with beans, with the legumes. So most beans and legumes contain high amounts of phytic acid, but studies show that soaking beans before eating them reduces their phytate levels significantly, because these anti-nutrients are water soluble, so they leach out into the water. Now you would need to soak, say, your raw beans and legumes for 12 hours. But if you add some apple cider vinegar or lemon juice to the water, this can break down the phytates faster and reduce that time to about 7. So planning your meals in advance is obviously very important if you're, going to cook with raw legumes. By the way, the lowest phytic acid levels were found in mung beans, runner beans, red and brown lentils and chickpeas. Now, of course, if you buy tinned beans and legumes, which a lot of us do a lot of the time, you just need to rinse them really well, so when you bung them out into your colander or your strainer, and when you're rinsing them with water, you'll notice like a foam or bubbles. So you need to keep rinsing them until that has completely disappeared and the water runs clear. So next up are nuts and seeds. When a plant is ripening, the phytates rapidly accumulate in the seeds. Now you can eat them raw and get the benefits of the phytates and some of the minerals, again, once you're eating a varied diet. With nuts and seeds, we only need, particularly with nuts, only, small amounts anyway, like 5 or 6 cashews. You're not going to eat a whole bag of nuts in one sitting. Now, if you do have any mineral deficiencies or you would just like to reduce the phytates in your nuts and seeds, you can soak them or toast them to release the phytates. So adding the heat will help too. And toasting and roasting them can actually enhance the flavour as well. So moving on to whole grains, what can we do with, for example, our oats? Well, we can soak them, and soaking them will help to release the phytates and unbind the minerals. Cooking, fermenting, yeast leavening, baking and sprouting also are great to reduce the phytates in whole grains. So I suppose when we mentioned the yeast leavening and fermenting sourdough bread, that's why it's a much healthier and better choice for our gut. And it's how we always used to make bread anyway, really the ancient way of doing things, there was a wisdom in it, and that has sometimes been sacrificed for modern conveniences, which we've all got used to. So sprouting and malting enhances the activity of that phytase, that digestive enzyme, which decreases the phytic acid. You can always add other elements to your dish. So vitamin C seems to be strong enough to overcome phytic acid. So there's another reason to add berries to your porridge. Obviously, other sources of vitamin C are citrus. So your oranges, lemons, limes, kiwis, grapefruits, bell peppers, strawberries, tomatoes, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower and white potatoes. So again, a varied diet is adding other elements to your meal, which can help to deal with the phytic acid. Animal protein from meat, your poultry, fish or eggs, they increase the absorption of zinc and copper and iron, but not protein from dairy, which seems to hinder the absorption of iron and zinc. A low pH in our gut enhances iron absorption, and balancing the level of beneficial bacteria in our digestive system also helps with ensuring that our pH levels are low. Now, it might be worth mentioning, in case there are any vegans listening, that if you are depending on plant sources of iron like spinach, which contains phytic acid, then you really need to make sure that you are using those methods to prepare and cook your food to reduce the phytates, and also consume loads of iron sources, so maybe even a higher volume of sources of iron than meat eaters. if you eat lots of vitamin C rich foods with them as well, as we mentioned, the vitamin C can handle the phytic acid, and also eat mineral absorbing enhancers like garlic and onions, and they help us to absorb like minerals like iron and zinc. Another just little note is that if you're eating lots of phytate rich foods, keep an eye on your vitamin D levels, because phytates, like a really high volume of phytates, may speed up our metabolism of vitamin D. So, obviously as we get older, we're having bloods done maybe every year, every 2 years, and always asked to have your vitamin D levels checked. And of course, for vegans, your vitamin B12 as well. So in summary, the best way to reduce or release phytates in whole grains, beans and lentils is to soak, ferment or sprout them. Heating will also help, and we can also add vitamin C rich foods to our meals and animal protein to our main meals, unless we're vegan, of course. And with a healthy gut and a varied diet, phytates and the plants that contain them have health benefits. So we don't need to panic, about eating them, and we should include them in our diet. It's all about balance and moderation and keeping our digestion in good order, because those plants contain fiber, which are going to feed our good gut bacteria as well. It all comes back to a varied whole food diet. But of course, if you have any mineral deficiencies, you could reduce some of these foods temporarily to heal your gut before reintroducing them. But obviously get some advice in relation to this. Oxalates are found in foods like spinach, rhubarb, beets and nuts, and you would hear about them in particular for their role in a certain type of kidney stones, which we'll come back to shortly. But they are common organic compounds produced by a range of living organisms, which includes bacteria, plants, humans, animals and fungi. So we would produce oxalates as a byproduct or a waste product in our liver. Or we might get it from our diet in fruits and vegetables, nuts and whole grains. Now, small amounts of oxalic acid are not harmful, but this compound can inhibit our absorption of other nutrients, so that's why it's referred to as an anti-nutrient like phytates, because it binds to minerals that we need. And again, once we understand them and focus on a healthy digestion and varied diet, we certainly don't need to avoid these healthy foods altogether. Now, if we had unexplained deficiencies of some minerals, or if we were prone to kidney stones, then obviously get some personalised advice on how and when you should eat these foods. So for most people, enjoying oxalate-rich foods in moderation is perfectly safe. And cooking, boiling or steaming significantly reduces oxalate levels in some foods. So, that's what we do with most of our vegetables anyway. Hydrating. So another reason to drink water. Staying well hydrated helps prevent oxalate crystals from forming too. And that's what causes one type of kidney stone. Many high oxalate foods also offer other valuable nutrients, like vitamins and minerals and fiber. So, obviously there's another reason why we shouldn't avoid them. So again, vegetarians and vegans would generally consume higher amounts of oxalates. So that may reduce the availability of calcium, so obviously if you're vegan, you want to ensure that you're cooking these vegetables as opposed to eating everything raw, and also ensure that you have lots of calcium sources in your diet. Now, believe it or not, when measuring the mean daily intake of oxalate in the English diets, tea was the thing that contributed the greatest proportion of oxalates. So hopefully this might motivate you to replace a few cups of tea during the day with herbal teas, where you're getting some phytonutrients as well. And I'll actually put a link in the show notes to Health Tea. We've had Roisin on before, and she has a great iron brew tea which you can get online, and that would actually help in boosting your iron levels, if your iron is a little bit low. So replace a couple of cups of your black tea with some herbal teas. So just getting back to the kidney stones, I thought I'd briefly tell you about the different types, because if you have been diagnosed with them, it's useful to know which type it is, because then you can help yourself to manage or avoid them, So the most common one is the calcium kidney stone. We all have, a small amount of calcium and oxalate in our urinary tract at some point. And for the most part, these compounds remain dissolved, and so we don't experience any problems. However, in some people, the compounds form crystals and then kidney stones. So not drinking enough fluids can contribute to the low urinary output, which and then that will cause a problem. So again, another reason to stay hydrated. Most kidney stones are calcium stones, usually in the form of that calcium oxalate. Dietary factors, high doses of vitamin D, intestinal bypass surgery, and metabolic disorders can increase the concentration of calcium or oxalate in the urine. The second type of stone is a struvite stone, and these can form after UTIs. They can grow quickly and become quite large, and sometimes there are few symptoms or little warning, and all of a sudden you have this large struvite stone. Third type is uric acid. So uric acid stones can form if you lose too much fluid due to chronic diarrhea, for example, or malabsorption. So if you're eating a really high protein diet, people with diabetes or metabolic syndrome might be more likely to have a uric acid stone. And certain genetic factors might also increase the risk of this type of kidney stone. And then the fourth type are cystine stones. And these stones form in people with a hereditary disorder called cystinuria that causes the kidneys to excrete too much of a specific amino acid. So just to mention the gut again, because certain gut bacteria can break down oxalic acid to prevent it from binding to minerals and reducing absorption. So again, we're coming back to really, if you focus on the gut, a lot of the other issues will kind of fall away. Certain bacteria in the digestive system can metabolize the dietary oxalate before it binds to minerals. So this is Oxalobacter formigenes, and this is common. According to research, it is present in the feces of about 60 to 80% of adults. So it is one that we generally, most of us do have. If you experience recurrent calcium oxalate kidney stones, you may have less of this bacteria, so it might be worth, checking that out and replenishing that good gut bacteria. So if you're on antibiotics, obviously antibiotics kill good bacteria as well as bad bacteria. So it's really important to replenish the gut bacteria and repopulate the gut microbiome, with these strains which reduce your oxalate. If you are on antibiotics and you want to take probiotics at the same time, make sure you leave about 2 hours in between so that the antibiotic doesn't kill the probiotic. So what are the foods that are particularly high in oxalates? Well, really amazing and healthy foods like spinach, kale, Swiss chard, sweet potatoes, rhubarb, beets, potato skins, black tea, soya, cocoa, nuts such as almond, Brazil nuts and pine nuts. And we know that cooking them can reduce the oxalates, and also staying hydrated can help, and having a healthy gut microbiome can help. So as with phytates, understanding them and how they interact with our body, eating balanced, varied diets is the key to maximizing the nutrients that we can absorb from our food and minimizing the potential drawbacks. So the store cupboard staple for this episode is a plant high in both oxalates and phytates, just for the crack. Brazil nuts. So Brazil nuts are the seeds of a tree which grows wild in the Amazon valleys of Brazil, Bolivia and Peru. They are giant evergreen trees called, let's see if I can get this right, Bertholletia excelsa. I think that's right. Their trunk is over 6 feet wide and they grow to 165 feet. They have to be growing for at least 15 years or up to 30 before they produce their fruit in significant quantities. Now this tree will live and produce Brazil nuts for between 500 and 800 years. Brazil nuts were enjoyed by the local Amazon people for centuries, and then at the end of the 15th century, Spanish explorers led by Juan Alvarez Maldonado were told about the nuts and collected thousands for rations for their army. And then in 1633, Dutch explorers sent Brazil nuts home, and these giant seeds entered the global market. As with all nuts, but particularly Brazil nuts, we only need small amounts to get nutritional benefits, and we shouldn't overconsume them, in fact. 2 Brazil nuts contain 90 nutrient-dense calories, so they're a great source of energy, in addition to the other nutrients that they contain. So, by the way, it's not that I'm a huge fan of counting calories in most cases, but if you are trying to lose weight, nuts are brilliant for your health in small amounts. So they're loaded with healthy polyunsaturated fats. They're the best source of selenium, which has been shown to support our thyroid function. And lowers the risk of heart disease and cancer, can also help to reduce allergies and inflammation. And Brazil nuts also contain chromium, which may help to improve blood sugar levels for people with type 2 diabetes. You could add it to your homemade trail mix. There's one idea of what to do with Brazil nuts. You can toast them and chop them up to add them to salads. And you can also chop them up and add them to bread or muffins, or if you're making homemade cookies as well. So as with all nuts, if you've never eaten them before, start with eating only one and check that you're okay with it. That there's no allergic reaction after a few hours. Now, of course, if you're prone to kidney stones, these are high oxalates, so obviously avoid them. If you're concerned about the phytate content, or if you have any mineral deficiencies, then you can actually soak them overnight. So in summary, Brazil nuts are nutrient dense, so worthy of being a store cupboard staple, but in small doses. And, even with the healthiest gut, you want to go max two or three a day. So hopefully there's a few tips there and some good information that you can add some Brazil nuts into your shopping trolley this week. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I just wanted to clarify that the podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional care from a doctor or trained health professional, nor constitute medical advice or services if you're in a position to need either. However, if you found it interesting, you can subscribe to make sure you don't miss future episodes, or sign up for my newsletter on lynsharkeynutrition.ie.